questions on this subject? Yes, ma'am.
Do you think the president's sanctions went far enough? Because at the outset, there were some, even his closest allies, that felt that he could have issued harsher sanctions. Senator Chris Coons comes to mind. And then following up on that, there's a group of lawmakers from both sides of the aisle that are calling on the president to respect Congress's war authorities. Do you support that as well?
I certainly support that, but I don't think those two things are related. The fact is, the President of the United States, by executive order, has the power to exercise to impose the sanctions. We understand this. We are not in this alone. The beauty of it all is that it is a unified effort of our NATO allies, which, and of course, U.S. and Canada from this side of the Atlantic and on the others. The steps that the President is taking are appropriate. The Europeans feel the pain more than we do of sanctions. It is not without any collateral impact in their countries when you do. What we heard from the, shall we say, the head of the EU, the president of the EU Commission, was that they're into diversification in terms of their energy, meeting their energy needs and the rest, so they're not as dependent, but it will have an impact in the beginning. I think the president has full knowledge of what impact these sanctions will have and is fully ready to go all the way with it. And that's something that we have done together. I'm going to have Barbara Lee speak about the authorization of the use of military force, because this is something she's been a champion on for her entire service in the Congress. That's a different subject than as to whether the president can impose sanctions, as to whether he can go to war. Barbara?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I did sign the letter that Congressman Peter DeFazio was one of the leaders in that. And in fact, the president has indicated over and over and over again that in no way does he intend to allow or insert ground troops in this. With the increase in tensions, we signed the letter and wrote the letter because we want to make sure that Water Powers Act is complied with, and that the public understands that the president means what he says, because he's not going to insert ground troops into this possible incursion.
Understand that we've been trying to do this for a while, and one of the challenges that we face is coming to agreement on what is the scope, what would the president be allowed to do, what is the scope, what is the geography, what is the timetable of it all, and frequently that has been, shall we say, controversial.
Can I have another topic, if that's okay?
No, we're staying on security.
Why was it a good idea for the Biden administration not to impose pre-invasion sanctions on Russia, and couldn't it deter Russia from taking this action?
If I sound repetitive, it's because I am. This is a unified effort by our allies in the NATO alliance, and what was proposed was what was agreed to in terms of timing. There are, arguments about to go in. Well, what's the leverage once they go in, about how you exercise that. But the fact is, he is in, and we all have sanctions, and they will be swift, and they will be severe, and there will be a price to pay for Vladimir Putin in terms of what this is. So it's no use debating what could have happened before we went in. It is, remember, we're doing this together. Remember what I said about the impact on other countries. Remember also that there is a big argument that says once you go in, then the sanctions go forward, as opposed to the other side of it. Everything's in debate, but this was something that had broad support in the alliance.
Was the alliance incorrect? Did the alliance make the wrong judgment?
No, they didn't. I don't even. How can the alliance make the wrong judgment when the process is about unity? It's about unity. And I think that, frankly, you're wasting your time on something that is after the fact. The fact is, the countries came together and said, this is how we will go there. Some countries had to take a little longer to get to that place because of the exposure they have from sanctions or the process they have politically in their countries. But the fact is, if you have a unified approach, why would you depart from that?
To your question, I think the administration handled this, given the Russian intentions, as well as it could be handled. They telegraphed in advance the punitive sanctions that would be applied if Russia invaded. I think it made sense not to enforce those sanctions before Russia invaded. If you do that, then Russia loses its disincentive. It figures, well, we've already been sanctioned, we might as well go forward. It, as I mentioned before, declassified intelligence to defang any Russian pretext. It moved NATO assets closer to Russia, made it clear to Russia that if they invaded, it wouldn't drive NATO away, it would actually bring NATO closer to Russia. We repositioned U.S. forces closer to the region to make sure that our NATO allies understood that if the Russians invaded any NATO countries, that we would respond under Article 5. So I think the administration did everything it could do. But as the president made clear from the very beginning, if Putin has made the decision to go forward, none of this may stop him from invading. And as indeed the days closed in on this week, the president made it even more clear that it was our understanding that Putin had decided to go forward. Now I think it's our obligation to make sure that we remain aligned with our allies, that we continue to raise the costs on Russia of any of its invasion of Ukraine, any further invasion of Ukraine. But I think the president made it clear that he was going to do everything possible diplomatically through deterrence, and that's all you can do. If you've got a dictator like Putin who amasses 100,000 to 200,000 troops on the border of a much smaller, much weaker country, and is determined to invade, then short of going to war with Russia, embarking on this brutal package of sanctions, I think is the most effective way to raise costs on Russia. And I think the costs on Russia and Russian people are sadly going to go up and up and up the longer that Putin persists with this naked aggression.
Can I follow up on that really quickly? If the threat of sanctions was not enough to stop him from actually moving forward with an invasion, will these harsh sanctions that we're seeing now be enough of a deterrent for him?
Well, I think the sanctions are going to just continue to increase, and will have a ultimately crippling impact on many sectors of the Russian economy. We have to make sure that those costs continue and that the Russian people see the costs of their dictators' aggression. And we also need to continue, and this is the other thing I think the administration has done very importantly, and that is we need to continue to support Ukraine's ability to defend itself. And we have provided substantial military support. That support is going to continue. I think the British Foreign Secretary indicated that Britain intends to also provide that kind of support. I think she's made that public. And so we have to do everything possible to help the Ukrainians defend themselves, but also raise the costs on Putin for this kind of aggression. And I think that this is exactly the right approach.
But I have to just say that you haven't seen the depth of these sanctions yet. Putin is probably the richest man in the world. He has these palatial residences that's really what got people in trouble in Russia, because they showed the arrogance and the wealth with which he lived. So it's about, what is this about? The people of many of us have visited Ukraine and have seen that they love democracy. They do not want to live under Vladimir Putin. He does not want the Russian people to see what democracy looks like, and therefore he wants to bring them under his domain and his domain. So when he and his oligarchs, and it's all about money, follow the money in this, and that's what the sanctions are about. Follow the money. When they see how they're going to be undermined, how these visas will work, about how they can travel and have residences in every opulent place in the world. The Russian people have to see how they have been exploited by their own government. When I was in the panel with the defense minister, another woman from Germany, she was talking about, in the context of what Barbara Lee talked about misinformation and the rest. People have to know the truth. They have to know the truth. And part of what Putin is the master of, KGB, 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 for his life, his orientation, is misrepresentation. And he's effective at that unless we inoculate against it, unless we make the case against it so that the Russian people know the truth, that the surrounding areas know the truth. So it is, when we talk about the president, he's doing the sanctions. He has a full picture of all this. I said he was present there the day of the expansion of NATO. I saw the respect he commanded then, and that was 1997, by the heads of state of all of those countries. And of course, that has only grown over time by his leadership, but also the expansion of NATO. I think we're very well served. Respect his judgment. And again, it's not just about when you do the sanctions or how you support the people. It's about how the world views what Putin is doing. This is a very evil move on the part of Vladimir Putin. He's a KGB guy who happens to be probably the richest man in the world because of his exploitation of his own people that he doesn't want them to know about, and uses excuses like, it's changed. Every time you hear him say, well, they're part of us, that's who we are, they should be us. Now they're saying, well, we have to go in because they want to be part of NATO. This, my friends, is our moment. This is the Sudetenland. That's what people were saying there. You cannot ignore what Putin is doing. And nobody's, of course, ignoring it, but you cannot take it any lighter than what it is. A total assault on democracy.
On State of the Union, you had pretty unique security challenges through the last couple State of the Unions. We did insurrection, COVID. This year there's talk of these trucker protests. Are you confident in the security of the Capitol ahead of the State of the Union this year?
Well, again, this is in the realm of the police. It's my understanding when we arrived here last night that the chief of police had called for the National Guard to be present leading up to and around the time of the State of the Union, that they have a good handle on what the expectation is. Some of it won't even come until after the State of the Union, but no, I feel confident. Now, I don't have, people said, oh, don't let them put up a fence. That's not my call. That's a security call, and that's the call of the sergeants at arms and the chief of police. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Do you have any closing statements?
Yeah.